tonight, as part of the live series, hello, everybody say hello. Tonight at the live series, we're going to be talking to Sword and Pencil. He'll be jumping on here soon. He's got a couple, I know I'm late. So, we're going to be jumping on here soon, or he'll be jumping on here soon to, we're going to do a live. So, hopefully these lives are, helpful to you guys. Okay, I see he's on here. I'll bring him on here in just a second. So, next week, we're going to be talking to Hillary Jang. That'll be on our live next week. The week after that, we'll be talking to the Happy Givers. And then we've got the whole month of August lined up as well. I'll post that here as we get closer to August. Tonight, like I said, though, is Sword and Pencil. I'm going to see if I can't find him on here, and we'll add him, and we'll get started. I'm super pumped for this live. I've been following him for a while. Let's get him on here and get started. As soon as he... hey!
There we go. Am I really dark?
You are super dark right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's an online tan. Literally, I have the light. Here, let me try to rejoin. Is that cool?
That's cool, man, yeah.
Okay.
Here, I can.
Yeah, one sec.
All right. Technical difficulties, the first one we're having. So he'll join on here in a second as soon as we find out the light and stand issues and all that good stuff. But he'll try to rejoin here in a minute. But the reason we do these, to give you a little bit of a background, the reason we do these is to bring people into the light that you might not know about and to introduce you to them. Now, there's going to be people that we bring on here that you agree with, that you don't agree with, that I agree with, or don't agree with. The whole point is to get a good mix. All right, here we go. The whole point is to get a good mix. Why is this not working? Well, that's not cool because now I can't add him. Oh, Instagram, why are you the way you are? Okay, here we go. Hold on. All right, so let's add him.
I'm still really dark. Here, let me try that. Yeah, I'm even darker now.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to just roll with it, man.
Okay, we'll go with it. I'm not sure. Technical difficulties. Instagram sometimes doesn't work. I'm lucky I even was able to get you back on. It wasn't only a push the button. So, all right, we'll go with it. We'll go with it.
I'll be mysterious. It will add to my mystique.
That's right. They'll have to go to your page to see who you are. That's the only choice they'll have.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you for coming on, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Been following you for I don't know how I found you, honestly. I have no clue. But I know when I did, I was like, this guy's got some talent. And the way, and just so you guys that are watching know, the reason, one of the reasons I brought Josh on is that he has, in case you don't know his page, you need to go check his page out. He brings art and theology together in this really cool conversation type of way. So after this, you need to go follow his page. So that's cool. The idea.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that plug.
No problem. You did. You need more followers. You really do. Somebody said that the other day, and I was like, I can't agree more with that. So anyway, that's my plug for you, right? So that's free.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a couple questions just to keep it going. The way to get it started, at least, we'll see where it goes. And then I know you had a question thing on your story, so we'll see kind of what questions your people. I don't know if you have access to that right now or not.
I'll check. Yeah.
Okay. And I had a couple on my end too. So we'll go the first half hour just talking, and then the second half hour we'll kind of go. So the one thing I'd like to do is start at the beginning. So tell us about maybe the early stages of the church environment you grew up. How did you come into church? How did that all thing work out for you?
Okay, yeah. So I was kind of born in the church in one sense. So my parents are both Christians. I grew up going to a Baptist church. I joke all the time. People ask me oh, Josh, when did you... So I went to a Reformed Baptist seminary. This is way down the road. People would be like, hey, when did you become Reformed? And I was like, oh, I was just kind of formed, not reformed, just formed in this, Mm-hmm. And so growing up, my family was super hardcore. My dad is now a pastor. They're super hardcore, so we did Wayne Grudem for family devotions. We did Louis Burkhoff for family devotions. It was intense. Mm-hmm. And so my church upbringing was pretty conservative Baptist. Yeah, like it's almost like it's what you would kind of expect a Reformed Baptist upbringing to be, you know?
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Good deal. So at some point, obviously, and I know you've probably answered this on your page and stuff, but at some point that art and that
Yeah.
faith kind of joined together, mixed. So explain kind of that. Where did that all come together and come in at?
So I've been drawing my whole life, like on the back of tithing envelopes throughout church, doodling throughout all of school, and then I've just been a very curious person. And so I kind of say all the time, like if someone is drawing in church, and if like I used to make fun of things happening in church, and you have to really pay attention to do a funny drawing or a thought-provoking drawing. So if there are people who love drawing during church and stuff, I think that they should be more than allowed to do that. Because I really, really had to pay attention to sermons in order to make funny jokes about them. But my curiosity, I think, started allowing me to explore a lot of the things that I was brought up with. Um, and I guess just it sort of developed, I mean, a lot of like the intersection of faith and art for me developed with sword and pencil. Like I used to have faith conversations with people over drinks and I would draw stuff on the side, but then as time went on, it just started coming together in this really interesting way for me that I think is probably pretty beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of
Well,
just like a cultivated thing, you know?
got you. It just kind of grew. So obviously that gets to Sword and Pencil. When did you start bringing that to Instagram?
So maybe about 2 years ago is when I started Sword and
Okay.
Pencil, and it was kind of just like when I was in seminary, I would just draw pictures. So like I was in a systematics class and I just had this epiphany one day. This is like years ago. So I started my master's, I think it was like 8, 9 years ago is when I was doing my master's. I just had this epiphany that there were a ton of famous theologians named John. And so I drew this rock band, the Theological Johns of Rock, and I passed it around in class and I just got like a huge, like people got a
Mm-hmm.
kick out of it. And then my wife and I, fast forward like 6 years, my wife and I were moving from one part of the city, Toronto, to another part. And I was like, hey, babe, check this out. These are my old seminary notes. And I had the Theological Johns of Rock in there. And she's like, Josh, you should post these online. And so Sword and Pencil started out pretty like jokey jokes.
Yeah.
And then it's not as jokey jokes anymore. Just, I guess, on the page.
Yeah. Well, good deal. So, like, obviously, I mean, I've seen this. I've probably followed you for a year.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say right around there. But I've seen just that development on your page where it's went from drawings or you showing like how you're doing stuff or just in the process stuff to like every time you post now it is a picture and then the description is this little insightful thing. So was there something that happened as far as like a conversation or DMs you started getting or something like that that said, something, maybe this could be really beneficial to who's watching or who's, checking out this page?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, I'm sure you totally get this. As you step out, and as a person steps out into doing something, you kind of cultivate your gifts within it. And so for me, like just starting Sword and Pencil and doing it, I kind of started recognizing what I really like doing. And then in that stuff that I like doing, people started responding, which is really neat. And so even before the drawings got a bit more, plus like I really like tattoo style, and so I've just been getting better at doing tattoo style art. I started having a ton of awesome conversations with people that were really important to me. People would open up about where they are with their walk with Jesus. People would open up with their struggles in life. And I recognized that somehow with this, at first the beginning with this mixture of comedy and truth, and then comedy, art, and truth, and then now like a bit of all of that, I kind of just let a lot of people have their guards down. And since I'm not like hyper confrontational about what people believe, I just want to give people a space for a conversation. I tend to find that people just open up, and so I've just kind of rolled with it. And it's better for me now than it was back then. This is more in line with who I am and I guess like my giftings than just like the jokey jokes of, hey, here's John Piper as like Gollum from Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Those were good. I like the whole that.
So,
Yeah, those were really
so do
good.
I. That stuff still gets me, man.
Yeah. So as that developed,
Yeah.
obviously, like, so what's something, because I know from like, so just from my page, what I've noticed is I'll get DMs all the time that I would have never, when I started this page, expected to get, or conversations
Yeah.
I would have never expected to have, because all I'm doing is putting words on pictures and being like, hey guys, I think this is funny.
Yeah.
And then I'll get some pretty serious DMs and conversations start. So out of this, you're doing this whole process. And I know, I mean, I ask pretty much everybody that's on a live this question, but out of this
Yeah.
whole process that you're going through or have gone through,
Yeah.
what's something like super unexpected? You get something, you're like, I would have never imagined in a million years that, this door is open now because of what I'm doing.
Yeah. There are like probably a million stories. Some of them are like the really cool, like big time explosive stuff. But the stuff that touches me is uh, like people sending messages being like, dude, I'm so thankful to God for you. You've helped me through this intensely tough time. And they'll just like, people will record stuff or they'll give me a phone call, like we can chat or we'll Skype. And I'll just literally have like 35, 40-year-old dudes, like tough guys, just like break down on a call. And I'm like, I'm already sensitive enough to like, if a man starts crying about stuff, I'm like, okay, my eyes are a bit sweaty too. And so those things I never expected to have happen, just because I'm like, I'm just drawing pictures and being a bit honest. And then I kind of had this epiphany. I'm like, hey, maybe we need a lot more honesty and a lot more encouragement in the church, because it just, people need so little. And that they'll just message some random guy on the internet.
Yes, totally agree with, yeah.
It's just like, man, so I think for me, that's the coolest thing, is the fact that there's a ton of stuff that is like, I'm sure like you're a youth pastor, I'm sure you get this. There's the flash of being it, but then when a kid comes to you and is like, hey, Mike, thanks for everything. You're like, whew, that'll get you, you know?
So just to tap into that, because like I said, we're just going to go along with this kind of conversation. So that honesty part. So for example, I mean, I get that a lot, just like, like you do, as far as somebody will message, hey, thanks for being honest about this, or thanks for bringing this up, because, I do all the time and I get flack for it. Or I get a lot of messages where people are like, hey, thanks for bringing this up because I can't, or I don't feel comfortable doing it because I'll get attacked. So like, just building on this whole process here, what do you think we as the church can do, just church, universal can do to kind of foster that a little bit more, to where we can be honest and bold enough to bring up stuff that maybe isn't popular to say, but at the same time approach it in a gentle, like that balance, that manner of being honest but gentle. So how do you think we can cultivate that, or how have you seen that cultivated?
For me, I think it's a great question. I think for me, the church needs to really develop a very robust love for people. We tend to view people as their problems or their beliefs, and we tend to think that there are just facts that will fix people. And so say you have a girl and her husband and they have a miscarriage, you can just quote Romans 8:28 to them, that God works all things together for good, but they know that in their heads, but I don't think they know it in their souls. And so there's this thing where we need to learn to weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn, and that comes from genuine love. And I think part of that love is learning to dialogue. Learning that like people aren't just out to destroy the kingdom with what they think or believe. They're actually after truth. And so I have people message me the craziest stuff, and I'll be like, hey man, why do you think that? Just because we need to listen to each other and listen for understanding and listen to have a dialogue and back and forth. And so for me, I just think it's based in a genuine love where someone's at.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's not all knowledge based. It's really getting it out, living it out. So good. And I think I think there's a lot of truth in that, because a lot of people will come to the internet and message random people like you or I or other people that they see with some deep stuff that they should really be talking to somebody else about, but obviously they don't feel like there's that love or that relationship or that connection with those people. So there's lots of times where I've answered DMs and I'm like, hey, I know this is super important. You need to talk to your pastor, your parent, your somebody about this. Not me. I'm a totally random person that you literally don't know on the internet. Not the person you need to talk to.
I could be a serial killer.
Yeah.
which is a really good compartmentalization.
Yeah. So no, totally. Yeah. On that.
Yeah.
So, to go a little bit in a different direction with that. So
Yeah.
obviously you're well read. You did Wayne Grudem for family devotions.
Yeah.
You've been to seminary, that sort of thing. So if you could say, if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I got a little bit of time.
Hmm.
What are your 3 books that you would say, hey, these are 3 things, these are 3 books, if you can narrow it
Yeah.
down to 3, that
Yeah.
I should read because I don't got a lot of time, but I really need to dig in and, use my time wisely. So what are the 3
Yep.
best things that I can look at? What would be your suggestions?
It's a great question. So I think first off, you got to read a good hermeneutics book. And so I would suggest one of 2. They're both by a guy called Gordon Fee. He's got a book called How to Read Your Bible for All It's Worth. And his other one that's a bit tougher is Gospel and Spirit. Gospel and Spirit is like a hermeneutics book based on issues within evangelicalism. So there's like 8 or 10 chapters, and it will take you through a ton of stuff. Good hermeneutical stuff, as in the principles for studying and interpreting Scripture. But Gospel and Spirit gives a ton of real-life application to where evangelicalism was at when he wrote it. But, I mean, we're in the same place. So both of those books are key. Just choose one. That still counts as
There you
one.
go. That just counts as one. You're cheating, but I got you. Okay.
Did I just quote Gimli? You know, Lord of the Rings, when like Legolas takes down the big elephant in the movie and like all the people on it die? That only counts as one. Whatever. If you're not a Lord of the Rings guy, then I've given away my
It's been
nerdiness.
a long time since I've seen it.
The second book for me that kind of changed my life was a book called Kingdom Through Covenant. It's by Peter Gentry. He was my Old Testament professor at seminary, and it just, learning from him in class was mind-blowing, but this kind of just, one of the things that we tend to struggle with in modern evangelicalism is the big picture of the Bible. What is the overall story of the Bible? And sometimes we can wrap our head around it, but one of the things that they propose is that the Bible gives us a structure to use to put it together. And they say it's about God's kingdom through covenants with people. And so they just go through all the covenants, they go through the nature of God's kingdom. And for me, hearing that just revolutionized not even just how I read the Bible, but just being on page with God is huge. So that's number 2. And then for me, the third one is literature. So my favorite book is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And I think within that book, East of Eden, John Steinbeck is retelling the Genesis 6 story. There you go. Yeah, John Steinbeck is retelling the early Genesis story, and it's essentially just people learning to get past their sin in novel form. And so for me, I probably just read it at a great time in my life, and it just hit me really hard. And so I think theology is amazing. I read it all the time. I think literature is truth lived out, embodied truth.
Gotcha.
And I think we need a lot more of that. So those are my 3. If you got the time, they're all big books, but they're good books.
Gotcha. All right. I'm going to have to see if they're on Audible because that's the only time I got is driving times to read. So I'm going to have to check those out. I don't think I've ever read any of those. So there you go. Suggestions. Thank you. All right. So
they have my stamp of approval.
There you go. Okay. There we go. Well, here, that's a great segue to my next question that I had for you. So I've seen you mention a few times, and I've never seen anything that like is a red flag to me at all. But I've seen you mention a few times where you're like, people call me a heretic. So those have got your stamp of approval. So 2 questions in one, so it only counts as one. I'll just use what you use. One, why do you think people call you a heretic? And 2, how do you deal? And this would just be a general question that people can learn from. How do you deal with that? I don't want to call it hate, but just those comments coming in that say, hey, you're one thing, and you're like, but I'm just, I don't think I am. How do you, so 2 questions there. What do they say, and how do you deal with it?
So I think there are flavors of these people. So there are just, I think, like the who are like way out there. Like I'll have people call me a heretic, and then they'll cuss me out, like and I'll be like, okay, so I don't know what to make of this. So they go in one category. The The people in another category, I think, are I kind of make fun of them talking about how they're like the social media presence of heaven. They're like the guardians of, or the harbingers of truth. If I had to nail it down, I think they just have a very narrow view of what truth is.
Gotcha.
And when you touch that, I mean, like, there's probably ways of explaining it. Like, you can kind of just conceptualize this, right? Not even to like get all historical, but if you have a very ordered and tight group, you tend towards a kind of tyranny, like dictatorship. And deviance from that is kind of met with excommunication and death. And so, like, look through history, you see tyrannical dictatorships that if you deviate from the norm, you get killed. I think within Christianity, we have those kinds of things, and people aren't very familiar with how we use words like heretic or heresy or false teaching.
Especially on the internet.
Right. And so, like, you just get this, you just get the worst of both worlds, which is just like, hey, here's someone who's not of us or asking questions, and it threatens the order that we have, so we have to do hey, you're out. You're excommunicated. You can't be a part of us. That must be the only category. And so I just think it's a narrow view of that. Does that make sense?
I got you. Yeah, I think so. All right. And then, so how do you respond to those people?
So I actually really take time to respond to a ton of the haters, because if someone's motivated enough to message me, now there are times when I get like reprimanded and people will be like, hey, we're warning people not to follow you because you're leading people astray. I kind of just be like, hey, I can't do this, like whatever. But I've got to the point where I get to be free enough to ask someone. I'll be like, hey, like, why are you so upset? Or what do you want to know what I think? Or are you just messaging me to tell me what you think? And a question like that kind of gets someone, it steps them back. They're like, oh, and I've had people message me, be like, yeah, I don't really care what you think. I just want to tell you what I think. I'll be like, okay, do it.
Awesome.
I'm like, thanks for being honest. Tell me what you think, and we'll just move on. And so some stuff you don't sweat, some stuff you can't sweat. It used to, every once in a while, people get under my skin, and I've got some friends on here who are like, Josh, just pump the brakes, take a day off Instagram. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does. There you go. It's true. It does not matter.
Like, how do you deal with it?
Oh, me? One, I've got to the point now that we've got, in the early days of it, when it was like 10,000 under, I would try to communicate back and forth the comments. That was basically worthless. Because here's the thing, on the internet, because to reference, because you have a video, I think, about what heresy is and how you define it. You got that out there. So we'll link that later. And that's why I think that'd be a good video for people to watch, because there might be things that somebody hears you say and they misunderstand them, but that video really is good at clarifying. But what I do, I honestly, unless someone directly messages me, I don't even engage in the comments anymore if I can help it. There's lots of times where I'll start typing something, and then I'm just nope, not worth it. And actually, probably maybe 15, 20 minutes before we got on here, I did that. I was typing something, I'm like, you know something, it's pointless. It's not a good idea. So I just backed it off. Every so often I got to talk myself out of it.
I love it.
And then honestly, one of the best things, like you said at the end there, it doesn't matter. There was a point where I was like really letting it get to me. I was just like, no, but if they can only know what I just need to tell them. And my wife was just like, you realize this is Instagram, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right, babe. It's just Instagram. It's not a big deal. And ever since then, it's really one of those things, just that conversation really just like got my head. I was like, you know something? What does it matter? Now the conversations are important. I don't mean to say that those aren't important.
Yes.
But what I mean by it doesn't matter is the sense that it's to start a conversation. That's the whole point. So you don't have to agree with me, and I don't have to agree with you. There's people that I communicate with on a daily basis on here that have totally different theological perspectives than me, different beliefs than me, and we're cool. You don't have to agree with me. There's a lot of things that are secondary issues that are not salvation issues, and I'm not going to fight with you about those. I'm going to state them. I do that a lot. But I'm not going to be like, you can't be my friend because you think this or that. Now, there's people I follow still on here that are totally outside the realm of what I would consider Orthodox Christianity.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to point to them and be like, you should go follow those guys, but I'm
Right.
not going to unfollow them because I really like the dialogue. It keeps me on my toes a little bit, right? So
Yeah,
to know
for
what they're
sure.
thinking. So
I
that's how I
totally,
deal with it.
yeah. No, man, I think it's super well said. Like I follow a ton of people who I follow them on purpose. I fundamentally
Hmm.
disagree with them, but I think that the dialogue is so important. So if someone comes up to me and says like, "Hey, you know, um, we kind of have to move past this idea that the Bible's inerrant. We have to realize it was written
Hmm.
by humans and blah 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 blah." I'd be like, "Oh, I could just like double down and be like, no, 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 it's time for me to tell you what an
Hmm.
evangelical thinks, what I think." Or you could just be like, why do you think that? And as you hear them or you see their posts, you just kind of recognize like you sharpen yourself off
Hmm.
their
Yeah.
arguments. I think we need to learn to take our lumps as thinkers. We need to like learn to get in the ring instead of
Hmm.
calling for dad, being like, nope, nope, not unfair. This isn't a
Well,
good conversation. Someone
and I think
disagrees with me.
a lot of it is too. I mean, if you're going to just as Christian as general, but for
Yeah.
me, if I'm going to dish it out, I better be able to take it. So,
Yes.
I mean, so if I'm going to argue that your point of whatever that is isn't biblical, then I should be able to take your punches right back.
Bingo.
And again, like you said, it really sharpens that argument so that when I do have a conversation
Yeah.
outside of this Instagram with somebody that does think like that, I've already had that conversation, or I at least know a
Exactly.
little bit more about it than I did
Yeah,
before. So
for sure.
there's been people that have messaged me like, why do you follow so-and-so? Or why do you comment on their
Yeah.
stuff all the time? I'm like, look, I disagree with them. I wouldn't say that you should listen to what they say,
Yeah.
but you can't just write them off as, well, I'm not going to let that in my head, because you
Yeah.
need to know that. I mean, you at least need to
Yeah.
know what the opposing argument is, or you're not going to
Exactly.
be able to give an argument. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. So it looks like, yeah, it's about 30 minutes in. So I have one question that I like to ask everybody here,
Yep.
and I'm going to try to ask everybody that's ever on here, and then we'll get into the kind of the follower submitted questions. But what do you think right now? It's a
Hmm.
huge question, but what do you think is the biggest issue facing Christianity in general today?
Um, I probably double down on that dialogue. So, we tend to hear, I think dialogue is very important. And so, like, this is very important. Having dialogue with people around us is very important. And I think that as the church, as God's family, as a new covenant people, we have to recognize that being in the world and not of them doesn't mean that we isolate ourselves from them.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was very obviously engaged in his culture. Um, and even though we have a ton of like parables from Jesus, you clearly get the idea that he understands the cultural pulse of his time. And then we kind of look past this idea that like Jesus was invited to a ton of places because he was liked.
Mm-hmm.
And so like for me, I think that when it comes to any topic, the church needs to be able to say, okay, we're going to put our big boy pants on and we're going to have a conversation about this, and the world is going to tell us a bunch of stuff that we might fundamentally disagree with, but we're going to have a conversation with them. And that conversation isn't going to be, hey, these are the list of 20 facts you need to listen to, and if you don't, we're going to characterize you and we're going to talk past you and send you out. And I think we need to learn to do that on the inside. I think we have people who inside the church who are struggling with depression or anything on the spectrum, on free will or like women in leadership or the charismatic gifts. And instead of just going right into, well, hey, no, this is what we think, be like, hey, why are you asking that question? Where's that coming from? As we learn to have conversations, I think we'll make ourselves stronger. I think the church
Mm-hmm.
is actually growing weaker in fear of protecting people from big boy thoughts. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like so when my undergrad's in physics, when I was studying, by the time I came to third year, everything became world shattering. Um, the entire universe became way bigger than I could comprehend, and I had
Yeah.
I had my conservative upbringing, and then I had this new place in university. And I remember going and talking to my professors and being like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I was taught this. I used to be a young earth person growing up, and I'm like, here's how the math works out. And we use this math for everything else, but this math says that the universe is billions of years old. And my professors, one of them, just like, don't ever talk to me about this, but one of them sat down with me and was like, hey, let's chat about it. And it kind of just blew my mind. And I was like, oh, here's someone who's going to entertain where I come from. He's not a Christian. He does not think the earth is very, very young. And he's going to just chat with me through it. And it kind of totally impacted how I started interacting with people. Because I recognized it's probably way more important to hear where someone's coming from before you just force feed them something you think they need to know.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I can get on board with that. I mean, and like I said, I think a lot of it in that, I think the root of that, at least just when you were talking, that comes to mind is the sense that a lot of Christians are scared that if the idea is too big, then it crushes their faith, where it's not necessarily an idea of that idea being bigger than your God. It's just that the idea is there. How do you fundamentally see that in light of the fact of what you do know is true in Scripture? So how do you work with that? I mean, it's not an easy process. It's this process of working, actually working through your faith, not just saying you have that faith, and now when a big question comes up, well, never mind, I guess. I mean, I think, and I've seen it happen before, where a lot of people, something, whatever it is, whether it be, you see physics and the size of the universe, or just a big question comes up, and all of a sudden it's like, well, God must not be real because of this, or I'm going to shut down this thing because of what I believe in God, instead of fundamentally actually taking the legwork to work through those things, being okay with the questions, at the same time being founded in the fact that God is God and God is good. So how do those two things come together? So I think dialogue is super important on that part of it. So.
And so, like, I take that, like, I just keep going with it, where you say, sometimes we think we're protecting ourselves or protecting God by not asking the questions. But the Bible is filled with people who ask questions. It's filled with stories of people who had their journeys and wrestling through things. And I think the reality is, when you have a question and you ask it, you go on this journey of learning truth, and that's what makes you stronger. If you hide from it, you're vulnerable to that question, and life will always hit you. Like, so we were at church on Sunday, and someone was talking just about the problem of life and suffering, and my wife, like, just kind of leaned over to me halfway through, because just the one girl, someone said, like, maybe you haven't struggled with this, or someone mentioned something, and my wife was just like, yeah, but you will. Life is going to hit all of us. And we have this time to develop our thoughts, to develop our theology, to develop our strength in truth. And that hurts. Like, literally every part of the journey hurts. But it's like going to the gym. It is not fun going to the gym. It's not fun working out, but you get stronger and you can lift more weight. And as you can lift more weight, you can resist. You're stronger. You're able to endure more. And so that's the same with our spiritual lives and our mental lives as we go through stuff. So, like, I just think it's key, be like, oh, I never want to get hurt, so I'm gonna be a bubble boy. And as soon as something breaks the bubble, and that Christian bubble, you're dead. Or you could be like, hey, I'm gonna go get hurt a little bit every day, and I'll get stronger from it. And now I can take a big punch, and I'll be okay.
Now, to build onto that real quick before we do get into the questions, an important part of that, I think, just hearing that conversation happening, is how big of a part of that conversation do you think, how important is a Christian community around you while you journey through that? I mean, how important is that?
Just vital. So, like, for me, just to be very honest, the way that I view life, like asking these questions and giving space, and the way my mind works, I tend to be, for a long time, I felt like an outsider. Because I would just ask questions and be like, Josh, you can't ask this. Don't do that. Don't you just, and I'd be like, I just need to know. And so part of it was like the church, and then part of it was myself. There just became this distance. I was a Christian, but I had this issue with things. And as I became kind of the Lone Ranger trying to figure stuff out, things did not go well for me. And so sometimes if we go on these journeys, we think we can do them alone or we think they're very important, but what we really need is the body. We need, and the better way of thinking about the church is just the family of God, you know? We're like, if you have a brother or a sister or a cousin or your mom or your dad, if they're going through something, you're a part of them with them on their journey. If they get cancer, you don't be like, well, don't you know it's better to be healthy? Be like, yeah, I know, but we're together on the journey through it. All the days that are up and all the days that are down, family sticks together. And I think that, again, it's just that developing genuine love for each other to be brave enough to go on a journey that will hurt, but be good, you know?
Gotcha. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So let me pull up a few questions here that I got on my, well, if it will let me.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah, it's not going to let. Oh, here we go. Finally.
There we go.
It's giving me all sorts of issues today, dude.
It's got to be me, man. I'm sitting in the dark.
All right. So we'll get with this one right here. One of the first questions is, when and where did you first hear about the gospel?
That is a really tough question because I got saved. I became a Christian, whatever that means, when I was like 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
I don't even remember, like, the things I remember when I was 7 or 8 were like mischievous, you know?
Gotcha.
But we watched a Jesus movie, and I remember just like crying, being like, I love that guy, and I want to be with him, and I don't want to go to hell.
Yeah.
And so
that's pretty much the thoughts of an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 8-year-olds are like, that guy's cool, and he saves me from hell, which I couldn't conceptualize at 8 years old, and so whatever I learned in Sunday school would have just been terrifying to an 8-year-old, and so I'd be like, yeah, I'm on that team. And then that developed. I'm still on the team. That's just developed.
Gotcha. All right. Next question we got here. There is one question that's totally like not theological or anything like that, but when somebody did have a question, and I want to point them your way just because of I know you're good at it, but do you do commission tattoo work or just commission work for people? Help you out a little bit here.
Yes, I do.
How do I do?
Yeah, you just DM me. I'm putting it on pause for a bit because I just started a new job on Monday, and so I have to rejig my work-life balance. And so there's a couple commissions that I'm still working through to the end. But if you message me in the next little while, I'll be putting you on a big list. And then once I figure out my life and my time, I will come back and message you. Gotcha. So yeah, it's literally one of my favorite things. And I'll just say something about price. I am purposefully as cheap as possible because I know that if you're a Christian and you're like running a podcast, you need a logo, money's a big obstacle, and we're all in this together. And so like, I just trust that God will provide for all of us. And so if I can just help someone get something off the ground, I'm more than happy to do so.
Good deal. All right. So from that to a much more serious question, or a harder question maybe. Opinions on how dinosaurs and evolution coincide with the Bible. That's a question I'm assuming you've probably dealt with.
Yeah. So the big question that we need to ask when some of these things pop up is, what is the Bible saying? What is Genesis saying? So one of these ideas that we'll bump into if you get one of those books that I mentioned is this thing called authorial intent. What is the author intending to say with this passage? And so Genesis, the first couple chapters of Genesis have always been tricky for people, you know, not just in our modern post-scientific method era, but even earlier, people like